Um, I want to go for another 5 minutes and so that we have enough time for questions. So I'll zip up a little bit here and go a little bit faster. Um, I think of just like I talked about dosing carbs for lows, I think about dosing walking for highs. This can be a really helpful strategy kind of right after a meal when blood sugar is just starting to rise, um, just to bring things back down into range. And so I'm a big fan of walking after meals. I think it works really well. And it doesn't need to be a long walk. It could be 10 minutes, just something. And I try to be more intentional about walking if I know I'm eating a much higher carb meal or a much bigger meal than I normally would. Like I might try to get an extra walk in if I can. It's not always possible, of course, but it's just another tool in the toolbox that I find helpful. Related to exercise is this what we would call in psychology like black and white thinking or all or nothing thinking. And it's this just desire to separate things into discrete categories like, well, I don't have an hour, so I can't exercise. And I think it's especially easy to do this with exercise and time. But once you start looking for black and white thinking or all or nothing thinking, you see it everywhere. And my antidote to that is the idea that 5 minutes beats 0 minutes. So if I ever find myself saying, well, I don't have an hour, so I can't do blank, I just try to, and it's important to me that I do blank. I try to do 5 minutes because I know that if I follow this, I'm going to do zero. And 5 minutes is better than zero. And if it's something important to me, something that I value, then this can often remind me that like a tiny step is better than no step at all. So that can be a kind of helpful reframe. And because I'm graphical, I think this is a good way to represent, the black and white thinking. Well, there's zero or there's an hour of exercise. And the reality in living with diabetes is that it's a very, every day is a checkerboard of different colors. And we're just sort of swimming in all of these different options and reasons for things happening and potential things that I can do about them. And I think trying to expand from black and white thinking to more contextual, multi-layered thinking can be really helpful. And then the last one is just sleep. So this is a good example of how another unfair thing about diabetes, which is sometimes when one or two things aren't going well, then things start to stack and snowball, kind of like a 10-car pile up in a car accident. So this is an example of I had a really early morning radio interview for a presentation I was doing in Chicago. This was a few years ago. And you can see I was wearing the Dexcom G5 at the time. So we know that's at least probably 6 years ago. And I got 4.5 hours of sleep. I was really stressed and nervous about doing this because I'd never done something like that. I hadn't eaten anything, only some caffeine from green tea. And you can see how that combo of lack of sleep, stress, and just a little bit of caffeine spiked my blood sugar from say 95 to almost 200 within 45 minutes, basically. And of course, this is really common, I think, in the morning, just because of the physiology of blood sugar and cortisol and hormones and stress in the morning, lack of sleep, caffeine. And I think this is a good reason why breakfast is so hard with diabetes, just because of how all this kind of stacks on top of each other. So this is a fabulous book on sleep. It's by Matthew Walker. And it really, sleep is, of course, in the original Bright Spots and Landmines, but this book came out only a couple years ago, and it really put together so many other pieces for me of how sleep interrelates to so many other variables in diabetes. Of course, it relates to, when I get enough sleep, I have higher time in range the next day. My peak blood sugars are much lower. I need less insulin. My insulin resistance is lower. I'm not as hungry the next day. So of course, that's a good example of things stacking. Like when I don't get enough sleep, I have like lots of hunger the next day and lots of carb and sugar cravings. So of course, like at precisely the time I don't want those things because of all the other things on this slide, that's when I'm getting the carb and sugar cravings. And there's lots of really good science on how lack of sleep kind of affects all of these things. So these are not just anecdotal um, experiences, but actually what the data shows. And then of course that piece around stress, which I already talked about, and then weight loss is actually, it's really, really hard to lose weight if you're not getting enough sleep. And he makes a good job of that point in the book. So, I think sleep can be under recognized. And of course, this is a good example of circular causality because sleep impacts my diabetes and my blood sugars and diabetes impact my sleep. And so trying to figure out where to focus things is tough. The book is free. That's intentional because I did it in my spare time, and we launched it on Diatribe. And I thought, my goal here is to get it to as many people as possible. So it's free to download there. The audiobook is free on YouTube. On Amazon, it's $6, which is the cost pricing. So Diatribe and I don't make any revenue off of that, and we just want it to be accessible. You can get on the Diatribe email list at that link. That's also free. And yeah, just, if I could leave you with two takeaways, I think one is just remember this, to not forget about bright spots. Everyone has strengths. Everyone has things that are working, even if they're small. And the other is don't forget about how complicated it is to live with this disease, and remind your patients of that, because I think that can get lost sometimes. You're welcome to email me at this address. I don't check it that often, but I do check it. And yeah, those are the links for Diatribe.